In 1975, an engineer walked into his boss's office and placed a small camera on the desk. It had no film, no cartridge, no darkroom chemicals, just a sensor, a digital display, and a recording that lasted 23 seconds. His boss looked at it and said, "That's cute, but don't tell anyone about this." That engineer's name was Steve Sasson, and the company that told him to bury his invention, it was the same company that held the patent for that invention for nearly 2 decades, long enough to change everything, and still went bankrupt. This is the story of Kodak. Not just how it fell, but why. And the reason is far more disturbing than most business failures, because Kodak didn't miss the future. Kodak invented the future. They just chose not to live in it. To understand how Kodak fell, you have to first understand just how dominant they were. We're talking about a level of market control that most companies today can't even dream of. George Eastman founded the company in 1892 in Rochester, New York. And from the very beginning, he had one idea that most businessmen of his era hadn't figured out yet. Photography wasn't a product. It was a habit. His slogan, "You press the button, we do the rest," wasn't just a marketing line, it was a business model. Eastman sold cameras cheap, sometimes at a loss, because the real money? It was in the film. Every photo taken was a recurring purchase. Every birthday, every wedding, every summer holiday, Kodak had a seat at the table. By the 1970s, Kodak controlled 90% of the US film market. 90%. They had 85% of camera sales too. If someone in America was taking a photo, there was a near certain chance Kodak made every product involved in that moment. At their peak, Kodak employed 145,000 people worldwide. The city of Rochester was so economically tied to Kodak that locals nicknamed it Kodak City. They funded schools, they built hospitals, they ran pension plans that generations of families depended on. In 1996, the year most people now associate with peak internet, Kodak was valued at $31 billion. It was one of the most recognized brand names on the planet. And that same year, something was quietly happening inside their own labs that would unravel all of it. Let's go back to 1975. Steve Sasson was a 24-year-old electrical engineer at Kodak's research lab in Rochester. He'd been tasked with a fairly routine experiment, figuring out whether a new type of sensor called a charge-coupled device could be used to capture images. What he built weighed 8 pounds. It took 23 seconds to record a single black and white image onto a cassette tape. The image had a resolution of 0.01 megapixels. A modern iPhone produces images 10,000 times sharper. And yet what Sasson had in his hands was something the world had never seen before. A camera with no film. He showed it to Kodak's management, and their reaction wasn't excitement. It wasn't even curiosity. It was something closer to dread. Because here's the problem Kodak saw immediately. If digital photography works, if it ever becomes good enough, people stop buying film. And film wasn't just Kodak's product. Film was Kodak's entire business. Film processing, film chemicals, film paper. The margins on film were extraordinary. Some estimates suggest film contributed up to 70% of Kodak's total profits. Sasson later recalled management asking him, "When will this be better than film?" He estimated 10 years. "So," they said, "we have 10 years. Fine." And they shelved it. Now here's what makes this story more complex than a simple case of corporate stupidity, because it wasn't stupidity. Kodak actually filed for patents. They did continue researching digital. They even launched some early digital products in the 1990s. The problem wasn't that they didn't see digital coming. The problem was that they saw it coming and couldn't bring themselves to run toward it. Here's the business concept at work here, and it has a name. Economists call it the innovator's dilemma. The idea is simple. The better you are at your current business, the harder it is to cannibalize it. Every rational decision you make to protect today's profits makes you more vulnerable to tomorrow's disruption. Kodak ran the numbers internally. They modeled what would happen to their profits if they threw everything into digital. The answer was clear: short-term devastation. Film revenue would collapse before digital revenue could replace it. Shareholders would revolt. Factories would close. Tens of thousands of jobs would go. So leadership made a decision that felt rational in every quarterly report: keep film alive as long as possible, invest just enough in digital to stay relevant, and hope the transition happens slowly. But the transition didn't happen slowly. The internet changed everything. Suddenly, digital cameras didn't just capture better images, they let you share those images instantly. Email, then websites, then social media. The feedback loop of sharing accelerated digital adoption faster than anyone had modeled. In 2000, Kodak had revenues of $13.8 billion and over 80,000 employees. By 2011, revenues had dropped to $6.2 billion. By 2012, Kodak filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. A 131-year-old company. One of the most valuable brands in American history. Gone. And here's the detail that really stings. Instagram, the app that essentially replaced film photography culturally, was acquired by Facebook in 2012 for $1 billion, the same year Kodak went bankrupt. Instagram had 13 employees. Kodak, at its peak, had 145,000. It's easy to look back at Kodak and say they were blind, that their executives were arrogant or complacent or simply didn't understand technology. But that's not quite the truth, and that version of the story is actually dangerous, because it lets every other company off the hook. Kodak's real failure was a failure of incentive structures. The people making decisions at Kodak were rewarded for protecting film. Their bonuses, their careers, their entire professional identities were tied to a product that was dying. Digital wasn't just a technological threat, it was a personal one. Think about it this way. If you were a senior Kodak manager in 1990 and someone came to you with a plan to invest heavily in digital, knowing it would hurt short-term profits, knowing the board would push back, knowing your bonus would take a hit, would you champion it? Or would you find reasons to delay? This is the lesson that applies to every company, every industry, and honestly, every individual. Success can be the most dangerous thing that ever happens to you, because success creates the very infrastructure that makes adaptation feel impossible. Kodak had $31 billion of reasons to protect the status quo. That's not stupidity. That's human nature. And the companies that survived disruption, Amazon, Netflix, Apple, they all share one characteristic. They were willing to destroy their own business models before someone else did. Jeff Bezos has a phrase for this. He calls it disagree and commit. Andy Grove, the legendary Intel CEO, called it only the paranoid survive. The underlying message is the same. The moment you start optimizing for what made you successful is the moment you start the clock on your own irrelevance. Steve Sasson, the engineer who built that first digital camera in 1975, he eventually received the National Medal of Technology from President Obama in 2009. 3 years before the company that employed him went bankrupt. The patent for the digital camera had long expired by then. The technology Kodak buried was now in the hands of Sony, Canon, Samsung, and eventually in the pocket of every person on Earth with a smartphone. Kodak still exists today, by the way. They emerged from bankruptcy in 2013 as a much smaller company focused on commercial printing and technology licensing. They have about 4,000 employees now. Down from 145,000, there's something almost Shakespearean about it. A company that gave the world the ability to freeze moments in time, undone because it couldn't adapt to the moment it was living in. If you've been thinking of another company while watching this, one that's sitting on something disruptive, protecting an old business model, delaying the inevitable, drop the name in the comments. that might be the next video. And if you want to be there when it comes out, the subscribe button is right there. No pressure. Just don't say you weren't warned.